Oh, well, I started really young. I started comedy when I was just 14. So my need to do it was really fueled by wanting to have a sense of autonomy about my life. I was really... I was pretty neglected as a kid, and I mean that my parents were immigrants, and so all they did was work, and so they didn't have a lot of time for me. So I really raised myself, and then I kind of felt really stifled by just the isolation and the loneliness, and I didn't want to be a kid anymore. So I went and I became a comic, and because I had raised myself, I hadn't been socialized at all to do anything. So there was not anything to stop me. A lot of Asian American women have trouble expressing themselves in any way because their, upbringing is so stifling. But I didn't have that because I just was pretty much a latchkey kid from the minute I was born.
Right.
So it didn't have an effect on me. So I was sort of able to do whatever I want. I didn't care. And I was also able to be around mostly men in comedy throughout my teenage years, and it felt actually kind of safe in a way. That there was some measure of sexual predatory stuff happening, but then at the same time there was also a lot of people there to protect me, but there were never any women, which is really weird. And so not until later when I became more of a well-known comic did I actually have women friends, women comedians. But we all kind of are pretty isolated in comedy.
So if you could define the most empowered moment in your life, if you can remember that moment where you felt so strong, and it could be a little tiny thing, but just something that was so meaningful and maybe even life-changing for you, what was it?
I think, it's really... I think it's a daily thing, It's like a constant thing where you're always like I think women in entertainment are certainly constantly scrutinized for their body, and if we're not conforming to a certain body type, it's a really tough thing. You can always hear that voice within. It's every time you conquer that. For me, when I was maybe 27, I had a lot of issues with eating disorders, and I was bulimic and anorexic, and the really destructive things that were going on, and I was abusing a lot of drugs and alcohol because it was more just an impetus not to eat. My addictions are really not about drugs or drinking. It's really about I'm trying to control my appetite. So when I sort of was able to conquer that first time, then you can keep going back in that that sort of train you made in your mind, this path, I don't need to be worried about that. I don't need to be worried about that. I don't need to suppress my physical urges because I want to appear a certain way in society.
Yeah.
So, but I think I remember doing that when I was in my 20s, and then so now I just have to keep repeating it every day. It's a constant trying to remind myself, I'm over that. I don't have to deal with that anymore.
It's so common. It is so common, and in my business, where we designers basically tell women they're not thin enough, pretty enough, rich enough to wear this because we present this unattainable image that is probably airbrushed and everything else, and it's very damaging. And then as a designer, we'll have model go-sees for photo shoots, and girls will come in, really beautiful girls, that are so emaciated that I get scared. I mean, it looks like they're going to die.
Yeah.
And especially before Fashion Week, there's no food consumed because they want to get the jobs. And it's a terrible thing that the industry has to deal with. It's yes, thin is great, but it wasn't always the image. In the 50s, it was curvy bodies. It's not always the image. And how do we kind of protect women from being overwhelmed? Something influenced you to believe that you had to be that thin in order to feel good about yourself. So there's a conflict that women have to deal with on feeling good about themselves, dealing with objectification, which is also just what I told you. The fashion industry is a contributor to objectifying women. It comes from everywhere. And, my goal is somehow to spread the word about this and for women to talk about it and to talk to men about it and to make it an issue that can go away simply because there's compassion on part of men and women to each other, but also an industry like mine that says, you know, you're not thin enough, and how crazy is that? How healthy you are is far more important.
Right. And that to me is really beauty, and then understanding what beauty is.
Absolutely.
And it's about feeling good.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank
you were
you.
amazing.
Thank you.